beginning of 2025, I started my journey with Fox, did some CONCACAF Champions Cup, did Gold Cup, and sort of like went through their whole, trial with me, and apparently didn't suck. And they asked me to do the World Cup. And now we've gotten to this point, which is kind of crazy considering this started doing games for Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey for $30 a pop.
Morning Kick-Around's World Cup coverage is brought to you by Oakland County Football Club, celebrating 10 years on the field, bleeding purple in Southeast Michigan 2026. Visit the website for tickets and visit Oakland County FC on Instagram to follow along the historic 10th season. Now, very excited to welcome in today's guest, announced to Fox's broadcast crew, Mr. Tyler Terens. Welcome aboard to Morning Kick-Around, sir.
Glad to be here. Glad to see Jason, not between the hours of 4 to 7 Eastern or 5 to 8 Eastern on WTF. And Rob, great to meet you for the first time. Been listening to the show for the past half hour, talking all things USL and what they're trying to do in all these markets and divisions, men's and women's. So glad to be here for the first time.
Tyler's an expert on all of things America. You've called every league, right? You've called every league in America for the most part.
Division 3 men's soccer and women's soccer, Division 1 men's and women's soccer, League 1, USL Championship, CONCACAF League, for people who remember that was like Europa League for CONCACAF, if you can imagine such a thing, where like teams from Belize and Trinidad and Tobago are like kind of the favorites entering into those tournaments within CONCACAF. So yes, I've caught a lot of soccer, but I'm very excited for this summer.
Yeah, on your Instagram page, when the announcement came that you were on the Fox's broadcast team for the World Cup, you kind of detailed your story of being a D3 player, and in 2018 you were commentating in the USL, at least the league that you referenced in that video, and then you set your goal to be in the team for 2026, and you did so. But kind of what was that leap from like getting started and then kind of starting to move up the ladder of commentary gigs?
Yeah, so a lot of people, particularly the diehards, I feel like at this point in time within the soccer broadcasting community, people have heard of this company, Vista World Link, which is down in South Florida, which is the house for NWSL broadcasts and even was MLS broadcast last year, offsite, and then also USL. So I've worked my way through there. I called like 500 games in 3 years, never actually going to a game, calling 5 or 6 games in a week, sometimes 3 games in a day. And I just got more and more reps. And then I ran into Tony Meola, who I met for the first time when he moved down from Jersey to Florida. And then he and I started to call some games together when he was down there. And then something happened with the Chicago Fire play-by-play guy that they were hiring, along with Tony to be the new voices on WGN when Joe Mansueto took over the team. And 2 weeks before the MLS season in 2020 started, Tony called me and was like, hey, the deal with the play-by-play guy that they were going to bring in fell through. Like, I think that this is going to be your big break. Chicago's going to call you as soon as we hang up the phone. So lo and behold, I ended up working with Tony Meola for 3 years at WGN and Chicago Fire, which was like some of the best years of my life. Like, I love working. I love Tony in general. He's like a second father to me, but like working with him, the crew that we had was amazing, living in Chicago. And then it was MLS season pass once the rights shifted. And then after that, beginning of 2025, I started my journey with Fox, did some CONCACAF Champions Cup, did Gold Cup, and sort of like went through their whole, trial with me, and apparently didn't suck. And they asked me to do the World Cup. And now we've gotten to this point, which is kind of crazy considering this started doing games for Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey for $30 a pop. So it's been
I like listening to slightly humble Tyler Terens. I don't usually talk to that Tyler Terens. I talk to a different Tyler Terens who's maybe a little more on the radio, which of course, look, we don't have to talk about the art of any of this. I just, it's incredible. No, it's great. And getting to know you as I have working with you on the radio has been great, Tyler, and definitely deserved this summer with the World Cup. So, give us your thoughts here on the preparation. How do you prepare for the World Cup? You know what games you're going to be calling, your partner. How do you do that?
So, I do it just like any other game, which has felt strange to me at times, like that I'm going to prepare the same way for a midweek Houston Dynamo St. Louis City game that I'm going to prepare for a Sweden Tunisia game and the opening game in Monterrey on June 14th. Like, that feels bizarre, but like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's gotten me to this point, this preparation. So I'm really just starting from scratch in terms of like my actual boards, all the individual players, making sure that I have everything that I need on these guys. Should there be a tight shot on them? Should they score a big goal? Should they get hurt? whatever it might be. And so that's, where they're originally from. A lot of these guys are obviously from their original country. Some are born elsewhere and then got a passport through one way or the other. It's caps. It's, where their stops have been in the club. It's, are they a starter? Are they a backup? Is this, their first World Cup? Is this their third? Whatever.
Can I ask you a very pedantic guy who talks for a living
You may.
about soccer question? Where do you come down on pronunciation, Tyler? How do you handle name pronunciation?
Don't do this. I know where you're going with this.
No, I'm not going anywhere. I've asked everybody this question because I struggle with this issue, right? I don't
And he
sometimes like you sound pretentious if you're trying to do it in the language of the person,
Yeah.
but that's how they would pronounce their name. Now, if I since I speak Spanish, it's hard for me not to give some Spanish flavor to a Spanish name. But if I'm saying a Czech player's name, I'm not trying very hard to say it the correct way.
I have a really difficult time with this because I feel like there are some languages where I feel like I can give a little, like Spanish. I'm serviceable enough to the point where I can say Gutierrez and I don't have to say Gutierrez. I don't have to say Gutierrez. Like I feel like I can do that. But then Sweden is arguably one of the most difficult languages to actually pronounce the name. Like the best man at my wedding is Swedish. And I've had many conversations with him about that. He's like, don't even bother because it's not, you're going to sound like an idiot and it's going to mess you up in the middle of a call. You're not going to get it right. So
that's what it is.
Just do the anglicized version, which by the way, a lot of these Swedish guys are perfectly okay with because they know how out there their language is comparatively to the rest of society. Right. So like, if I can give it the zhuzh that it requires while also remaining within the scope of language, within like quick play-by-play and sort of like stream of conscious play-by-play, then I will do it. If Portuguese, Brazilian, I think is another one where it's like Fernandez, and like if a player is called Rafael, right, in the anglicized version, but like they want to be called Rafa Navajo from the Colorado Rapids, I'll do that because it's Rafa Navajo. Like if he wants to be called that, but most of these guys, we're going to get audio files and they'll say their last name for us, and which is to me how they want it to be pronounced, and I will try to get as close as humanly possible to that. It's going to sound different for every country and every language, and I think that's just sort of what it is at this point in time. But as long as I'm doing it from the horse's mouth, I think that You know what? And like, I really didn't want to talk about that because one of the last interviews that I did, they're like, they compared it directly to Derek Ray because he's the king at pronunciation. So then I basically had to take a stance. Am I on Derek's side or am I not on Derek's side? And Derek is a wonderful guy. Okay. I spent a lot of time with him out in LA recently. And like, I just don't, I can appreciate how much care and how much attention he gives to it. And that's like become his thing. I can confidently say it is not my thing, but I will do my best to do all of these names justice within reason.
No, I think you do a good job. I think you do a good job. You don't want to come across like somebody who's never heard the name before or said or never heard, doesn't appreciate that there's a difference, right? I think there's a line. It's really tough because you don't want to sound pretentious, but you also don't want to sound uninformed.
Yes.
Right? You don't want to sound like an idiot.
So many baseball announcers are still saying Acuna as if there's not an Enya over. Like, I'm just like, what? Well, that's
but that's broad. Okay, what's interesting about that, and again, we're getting very granular here, is that they know they're broadcasting almost not universally. There are certainly a lot of Latinos who love baseball, but they're mostly broadcasting to English speakers who don't know the difference and don't care. You know what I'm saying? Like their audience,
then just say it the right way. That's my like. If they can't tell the difference, then what's the difference? Like
but what I mean is no one's going to call them on not saying Acuna.
Sure. Fair.
Whereas as a soccer announcer, this soccer fans in particular, and I love them, but they are extremely quick to tell you when you did something wrong. Right now, that means you can never get it right, and you might as well just pick a lane and go with it. But I just think that's an interesting part of this. I know I stopped you there. The partnership you mentioned, like Tony Meola was formative in your career. You formed a partnership with him. He's an excellent color commentator.
One of the best,
probably one of the best that we've ever had. You got Mo Edu, right? That's your partner for the World Cup.
Yeah.
So how do you work out a rapport? What's the move to make sure you and Mo have the rhythm right?
You know what's funny is that we've done like I think 25 games together at this point in time, and we sat down for dinner after we did our last game before the World Cup in LA. We were doing a game from the studio. I think it was a Germany and Ghana friendly. We had wrapped up. We go out to dinner together. Or no, it was, CONCACAF Champions Cup. And this was like a month and a half ago. And we sit down and like, we'd had a drink and I was just like, it's like, hey, by the way, I was like, are you cool with like how we call a game together? Like we've done 25 at this point in time. And we had never had a conversation about like how this is supposed to sound.
Right.
And he looked at me, he was like, bro, isn't it a little bit late for that? And I was like, well, yeah, but like, I at least heading into the World Cup would like to pretend we had a conversation about this. And he goes, no, you're right. Like, we probably should have. But I think that speaks to the fact that like Mo's a pro's pro. I've done enough games to the point where like I also know that like he's just he's a traditional American broadcaster. And like, what I mean by that is Warren Barton, somebody who I've also worked with a lot at Fox. He's more of a English sit down at a pub, you're having a conversation with him type guy, rather than like some of the technical aspects of the American network soccer broadcasting way are not something that Warren necessarily grew up with. So it's different. And what I mean by that is that like Mo and I just sort of, without saying anything to each other, we're able to fit into a groove. And we also get along off air, which I think is super important, right, for any sort of rapport on air.
I think it's hard not to get along with Mo Edu off air.
He's so much fun, and he's a huge Arsenal supporter, and I've just been giving him the most crap, and I'm not looking forward to spending a summer with the reigning champion, and especially if they were to win Champions League. That would
you could tell Mo that I'm upset with him, because last time he was on the radio, he was with Winalda in Vegas, and we were talking about the semifinal, and I said I'm an Atleti fan, and he said, why? And I was like, wait, hold on.
Why are you an Arsenal fan? That's right. Don't be gatekeeping my supportership. No, Mo's awesome, and we have a lot of fun together, both on and off the air. And like the rapport thing, sometimes it just clicks. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, and sometimes you just don't have it at all. And I think fortunately for Mo and I, and this is obviously something that Fox took into consideration when making partnerships, is that like I think it happened pretty quickly. And it's allowed us to be able to just fall into a rhythm. By the way, that conversation that we had talking about sort of like what our calls sound together lasted all of about a minute and a half. And then we just started talking about something else.
Well, that means you obviously have a good rapport going if it goes without saying. And definitely that comes across when partnerships don't really get along. That kind of comes through between the lines. And you referenced the partnership and then also calling games in studio. So for the World Cup, just a couple weeks away now, how many games are you guys covering? And are you guys going to be on location from the studio? How's that, the nuts and bolts all going to work there?
So Mo and I, at the bare minimum, will be doing 7 games, possibility for more, 6 group stage, and definitely around a 32 game. And then every single commentator is on site for every single game. All 109 games, Fox is going to be sending their commentators on site. So I like, and I have a lot of friends asking me that same question because they know how many games I've done off the monitor, and particularly like with Fox and doing a lot of these, European qualifiers and stuff like that. Like, we're doing it from LA. But I'm like so excited to get down to Mexico, to go to Canada, to go to stadiums in the US. Like it's, really like a kid in a candy shop type stuff to be able to like be at all of these games.
Well, traveling all across North America will definitely test any sort of bond or friendship, right? And I do want to ask, like, so from the commentator's perspective, like, what do you get, and what have you seen being in the stadium on location rather than being off the monitor?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I always tell people this. I think that I would put the percentage of like being able to have the best broadcast possible. You can get between like 85 to 90% offsite, in my opinion. If you're comfortable doing it and you know moments to be patient, waiting for camera angles, waiting to like make sure that something has happened, right? Because there's sometimes that a call's made and they immediately go, if you're doing a game off the monitor, if there's a call made and they go to a tight shot and you can't see the referee's signal or the AR's flag, you sometimes don't know exactly what the call is. Is it a handball? Is it a foul? Is it offside? Being patient, waiting to see the next angle, waiting to see, which way the players are moving or what. Like you can have a really, really good broadcast offsite. Being on site, I think, obviously, number one, energy and feeling the atmosphere, right? I think that riding that wave of momentum with the crowd, knowing when to sort of like up the cadence a little bit and up the energy and riding those moments of like when to hold your breath, like speaking as a fan and then relaying that as a commentator. I think that that's obviously super important. Being able to pick up on little nuances that are going down in the technical areas, seeing substitutes who are getting ready, maybe seeing some arguments that are happening between a central midfielder and a center back. And again, those are things that you can reference when you're on site, but also know that like you have to reference the monitor. Is the viewer at home seeing that? And if they're not,
Right.
you have to make it clear that they're not seeing it and that you're noticing that on the other side. And again, those are tiny little things that I think that can increase the level of the broadcast. But I think that you're still really capable of being able to have a really great broadcast, even if you're not on site, but you get that extra 10 to 15% when you're at the stadium.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I've never, I'm not in your world, I've maybe called 2 or 3 games and they were just larks more than like, oh, I'm making this my thing. So I wasn't thinking about the art of it. I was just nervous as hell about screwing up a player's name or
What
something.
games were you calling?
I got flown out to San Antonio when they were doing a whole "we want to go to MLS" and they were like rolling through a bunch of different tandems. It was me and Kanji. I worked with Steve
You and
Cangelosi.
Kanji called a game together?
We called a game together
That
in
is
San Antonio.
American soccer heritage at its finest, you and Kanji on the call.
I learned a
Dig
lot
it up,
from Kanji.
MK Ultras. Dig up that footage.
Oh man, I don't know. I'm sure I was terrible, right? It's not like anybody called me after that and was like, "Hey, you were," and I was in the co-commentator chair. I wasn't doing play-by-play because Steve
I'm
Cangelosi
not
is a
used to
genius.
hearing humble Jason. I'm used to seeing a much more on Jason on the radio.
Yeah, wow. Okay, that's well done. No, that thing about like obviously as a viewer, I want my commentators on site. Like for me, that feels like necessary. And we even had Lute say, World Cup games better be on site. Like just that's a respect of the game kind of feel for a lot of people. You think though that unless you are, look, I think I can tell sometimes, but maybe there's other times when I can't tell.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I do think some of that is down to audio, like the quality of it, what room these people might be sitting in. Even sometimes you'll hear guys, and look, nobody's under any illusion that that guys are being sent all over North America to call CONCACAF Champions League Cup games or something, right? But it is kind of funny when the audio goes out on from the world feed, from the feed, and the commentators are like, "We're having technical issues." That is funny.
Yes. But again, like this also comes with a level of access to these games that we really haven't had before, right? Like before, I don't know, 2016, 2017, and that was my first year at Vista. How many CONCACAF Champions Cup games were being aired where fans could be able to enjoy them, whether it be on linear TV or even on a streaming service, right? And with that, there need to be cost-cutting avenues that are taken, and not having broadcasters flying all over
Right, yeah.
not only North America, but CONCACAF region in general. Like, are you going to
Sure.
send somebody down to El Salvador to do a game?
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Toronto FC is on the road. So like soccer broadcasting has come a really, really long way. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to sort of like witness it firsthand while I'm also like climbing the ladder to a certain extent. And it's been really cool to see. And I've called more games off of a monitor, way more games off of a monitor than I have on site. I feel sometimes more comfortable doing a game off monitor than on site. Like I had to learn,
that's reps.
reps. I had to learn how to do it, like being in
Yeah.
the stadium when I
I
finally got to Chicago.
I had to learn how to work with a partner on the radio because I was solo for so long that when it was like they're like, I have to work with somebody else. I have to leave space for them to talk. What?
And
No,
who
that's
better to
insanity.
do that with than Eric Winalda, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. I asked for questions in the chat, so if you have a couple minutes, maybe we'll throw a couple at you. Jack says your favorite announcer, voice or style. Who's your guy? It doesn't have to be soccer, obviously, but maybe if you have.
Good question. I think it has to be Peter Drury. Now,
Okay.
I'm not nobody is as poetic as Peter Drury, but the way in which he builds to the moment, like take away his goal calls and his full-time whistle, dramatic poetry, which is phenomenal, right? And like makes us feel things in our gizzards. But the way that he moves through the game, the way that he can sometimes just, shift it down a couple of gears, call out the names, and just be a commentator, but then also build up to those big moments and calling out the first and last name while they have an opportunity to have a strike from 18 yards out. Like Peter for me is just like he just has such a good sense of the moments to shift through within a soccer game and how to to control his voice to move along with it and make sure that those two things are hand in hand. So Peter Drury definitely is the guy.
Nice.
Yeah, he's great to listen to, one of the classic voices. There was a question from an ultra earlier up in the conversation asking more of a technical question. Does Fox direct the world feed if it's based here, or who is
No.
directing the world feed?
No, so directing the world feed for any World Cup is always a company called HBS, Host Broadcasting Systems. So, it's the same thing, right? Like the Super Bowl, if it's being broadcast, let's say on CBS, all those cameras belong to CBS. And then if you want to be Portugal and you want to have Portuguese commentators on the Super Bowl, you are taking CBS's feed, you're taking the director and the producer from CBS, and then you're just laying Portuguese commentary and Portuguese ads over it through the graphics and everything like that. Same thing for the World Cup. Host Broadcasting Systems is hired by FIFA, and they're in control of all the cameras. That all those cameras belong to HBS and to FIFA, and then Fox is simply just taking that feed. So we're not in control of anything. So like if there's a quick cut or a bad shot of something or whatever, like I see a lot of people sometimes who will like tweet at Fox being like, this camera angle sucks or whatever. Like no, like Fox is just simply, like the rest of the world, taking the feed from HBS and then just putting Fox commentators and graphics and everything like that. And that's the same for CONCACAF Champions Cup. That's the same for, that's how soccer works, because it's such a global game, is that you can only really have one set of cameras there who belong to the host system that's responsible for cutting the show.
So there are a couple other questions, kind of what we've already talked about. One about your inspirations growing up. So you said Peter Drury. I'm assuming you've been listening to Peter Drury since you cared about certainly English football.
Yeah, but and Jason, I think that you and I have talked about this before, and I feel like most people don't know this about me though, is that like I didn't want to do this growing up as a kid. Like I wasn't a 7-year-old who was talking into a tape recorder, like laying my voice over a Jets or a Mets or a Knicks broadcast, which are my teams. Go Knicks, Knicks and 4. I just stumbled into this when I was 19 or 20 years old. So like paying attention to soccer commentary, unless you're a diehard or you work in the industry, or like you're somebody who just like lives and breathes and eats the game, which I was like as a college soccer player, but I wasn't paying attention to commentary as much. But like my inspirations growing up, like when I really started to take a look at it, when I still was quote unquote living in Jersey, going home for the summers in college, it was Mike Breen for the Knicks and on ESPN. It was Ian Eagle, who was local with the Nets. Bob Wischusen, on the radio for the Jets, and Joe Buck and Jim Nantz. Like those were more so the guys who I grew up with, like as an American sports fan. But then it became Arlo White, then it became Peter Drury, and
well, but it's interesting you mentioned Drury. Obviously, respect and obviously your influences, like a lot of us, like me for sure, were I listened and watched American sports, and the thing, there's always this question for me about how Americans respond to soccer broadcasters, because so many Americans are hardwired to think an English accent is the only justifiable way to broadcast a soccer game. I mean, I think American soccer teams, when MLS teams were in charge of their own broadcast, how many teams went and found themselves an Englishman? And I'm not hating on Arlo White, and I'm not hating on the guy, who's the guy in Nashville whose name I can't remember. Okay, Tony Husband. I like these guys. I talked to them. I know they came here, with their eyes open and willing and wanting to work in American soccer, but their hires speak to that idea that, hey, it's got to be an English accent. What do you make of that as an American who's trying to do your own thing, be respectful to the game, and maybe people just say, I hate Tyler Terens, but that's maybe not necessarily because of how you call a game, but because they're expecting to hear Peter Drury.
And that's totally fair. And you know what, like as somebody who was a sports fan before somebody who worked in the industry, I understand how important it is to like the commentator or like the person who's calling your team's games. And that's why we're so fond of, as American sports fans, particularly in sports like basketball and baseball and hockey, where you fall in love with your local commentator because they elicit something emotionally inside of you and you fall in love with that. With that in mind, I get why some people are just like, yeah, the only trustworthy narrator for a soccer game is an English voice. Fair enough. One of the lofty goals that I set for myself when I was 22, in addition to calling the World Cup in 2026, was like, I want to be such a good blend of an American sports commentator and have enough European vernacular and European vibe within a game that somebody's going to trust me one day to call the Premier League for their respective network, whoever that might be. Like, that's one of the goals that I set for myself, because that means that I'll have found the perfect blend for somebody to be able to trust Tyler, to be able to find that middle ground, which I think is what we're trying to do, right? Like, I also believe that, like, Peter Drury and Clyde Tilsley and all these guys, like, who, like, they're just becoming the soundtrack to big time soccer games. And it's not to say that John Strong isn't. It's not to say that Steve Cangelosi isn't. It's not to say that Jake Ziven isn't. But for so long, particularly at the European level, those guys are. So if that's the case, then, and I'm not trying to sound like any of them, but there's a cadence from a British standpoint comparatively to an American that I think that you can find some sort of really good blend. And it's not even something I'm trying to do consciously. It's
Right.
just something that, like,
Yeah.
I think is where we can find the middle ground to be able to, like, maybe push American soccer commentating to
I like that.
the next
I
level.
like that. I've spent a lot of my career thinking about stuff about thinking about how Americans don't trust Americans when it comes to soccer,
Which is,
which
which is crazy. Yeah.
which informs everything about, where we are and where we want to go and all these things. And it's always, we're always looking to somebody else. It's coaching. Oh, we got to look to the Dutch or the Belgians or the whoever, right? And that's true here. And I just want people to acknowledge, right, that you're coded to want an English voice, which does restrict our ability to create our own wholly American culture, right? Like, as long as we're leaning into America, there's a certain Englishman who's gobbling up all this money for his podcast network and such, and it frustrates me because I feel like too many people who are in charge default to this, and I give Fox credit for this because Fox has never been like this. That too many of these decision makers, Americans, but executives who maybe don't really know soccer all that well, their first instinct is, oh, get an Englishman. Get an
Mm.
Englishman to call the game. That's what we need to do. And that bothers me because, again, it means we're slowing down the growth of our own soccer culture. I know that's just me shaking my fist at the cloud, Tyler. I know.
No, it's difficult to disagree with it, though, right? Because especially as somebody who's in the industry and in the business and trying to push this along, sometimes that is the case and sometimes that is the default. But you know what? It's like, it, our industry, Jason, as you know, is so subjective. And, like, if there's one person at a network or one person at a radio station who either likes or doesn't like you, or thinks that it should be an English voice or thinks that it should be an American voice, then that's what it's going to be. It's really just like one or two people's preference that is
Yeah.
going to drive how the game is going to be viewed and listened and digested, which is insane because
It's insane.
one or two
It's insane.
people making the decision for how 15 million people per game are going to experience the World Cup. One or two people is like an exaggeration, right? Like, it's a collection, it's a committee, it's like it's a brain trust. But the point is that, like, Jason, if I was somebody listening in the car to WTF, I could, given the way that my brain is wired, and be like, I just can't stand the way that Jason Davis's voice sounds, or I
Oh,
cannot
I get a lot of that.
stand the way that Eric Winalda sounds when he speaks, even if he's the most credible person. Like, one of my biggest influences, actually, when I first started, was my sensory and perception psychology professor at Hobart College. Diehard baseball fan, big, like, commentator guy. He was a big John Sterling fan. He was a Yankee fan growing up. And what he and I always talked about when it came to commentary is that, like, how you process sound is such like it's like music, right? It's like music can take you back to a certain place and can elicit such emotion. And that's a really crazy thing to think about, that, like, Jason Davis's voice is somebody who, from 10 to 1 on for United States of Soccer for so many years, and then from 4 to 7 on for WTF. That's how they spend their day. That's like how they shift from work mode to insert
Sure.
Jimmy
Yeah.
Johnson mode, whatever, Joe Smith. And as a commentator, like, it's such a crazy thing to wrap your head around. It's just like, I could think that I called the best game possible, but somebody in Charlotte, who's listening to a Charlotte FC game, can despise the way that my voice sounds simply just because that's how their brain is wired. Fair enough. And to go
Yeah.
back to the original point,
Yeah.
it's like, if an executive thinks that that's how soccer is supposed to sound, that's how they think it's supposed to sound, and that's who they're simply going to hire. It's just sort of like, it's just
Yeah.
the way that it is.
Yeah, it's true.
Great conversation here with Tyler Terens. Tyler, thank you so much for joining and spending so much time with us here on Morning Kicker and answering some of the technical questions and some of the, emotional and, career advancement sort of questions in your line of work, going from 2018 all the way till now, hitting that goal. Audience, you can follow Tyler's showing some behind the scenes, I believe, of his journey through the 2026 World Cup. And of course, going to catch you on Fox. So congratulations on getting the gig. Thanks. And I look forward to following along through this journey and following the games.
I just followed you on Instagram. I wasn't before, so my apologies for that.
Look at this show, bridging the gap.
How long have I known you, Jason?
I wasn't really active on Instagram until very recently. I know you have my own pictures.
You know something? I used to come on your USSS show, okay, and talk about USL Championship for like 20, 25 minutes, if you remember, all right? And the fact that you just follow me on Instagram now is...
Nah, just...
Jason only reciprocates a follow if they've made it or if like they're a network broadcaster, somebody that's worth their time.
No, that's actually not it at all.
Status, Robert.
I just suck at Instagram, Tyler. That's what that is. I just suck at Instagram. And it's, man, I'm so excited for the summer for you. Obviously, I like Mo. I'm glad it's you two together. Two people I like working together. Excited to listen to the game. I mean, enjoy Mexico. I hope you do like a food journey while you're down there too.
All sorts of journeys. Right. Yeah, no, I'm all over. But thank you guys for having me on. I love it. You guys are doing the Lord's work, and I love two American guys covering American soccer and talking about what you guys talk about. So keep doing awesome stuff. Tyler. And thanks so much for everything, Jason. I learned a lot from you and listening to you. And I like to think that
we'll have a whole second bonus conversation whether Tyler likes working with me.
Yes, fair enough. Fine. I'll stop being nice to you. Goodbye, guys.
No,
that's Tyler Terens.